Welcome to tonight's pre-meeting for January 13th, 2025. We'll start. Does anybody have any? I didn't see any questions for the agenda. Then we'll start with reports. Councillor DeMott.
Did the inclusivity board. They had a presentation from special events from PRNL. So they were excited about that. They had a lot of questions this time about this different senior projects. And so I shared some of the agendas with that group so that they could see the details. So, that was it.
Councillor Ireland.
I just followed up about privatizing libraries, Huntington Beach. The reason why they haven't gone forward with it is they had three vendors or companies they were going to have bid it, and all of them decided not to bid it. So it's kind of hard to go forward with that. Anyway, I'm still looking outside the box, ways to save money for our residents. So I think they're going to try to get something on a ballot soon. So I'll follow up with them. Anyway.
Councillor Carmelia, are you on?
I am, yes. Hello. I stopped by the Westminster Chamber after hours at the 5280 Burger Bar this past week, and that was a really great event. And I just want to say a big thank you to the staff there because they were really wonderful. They worked hard with such a busy crowd. So big shout out to 5280. And then I have a pretty good update here from the North Metro Arts Alliance. They are right now planning and strategizing for the Arts Week that's coming up in April. And so that's pretty exciting. And I wanted to reiterate their mission just because it's so great. So I'm going to share that, which is the mission of the Arts Week is to connect residents with makers and creators to celebrate inclusion, diversity, and arts and culture in Westminster, and to build an identity for Westminster as a destination for arts and culture by connecting Arts Week elements with business partners. So I wanted to celebrate that and give them a shout out because they're working really hard. This year, they have 40 partners, which is really exciting because the first year that it was done, which was only 2 years ago, they had 10. And so it's really grown. It's exploded pretty quickly here. So that's exciting. And the schedule is almost finalized. They're going to be having events at all over town on different days, including the Orchard Town Center, College Hill Library, the MAC, Westminster High School, and several other locations. And there's a new event this year as well, which is they're going to have a mini mural painting, which will happen in real time. So there's going to be a call soon here for entry for muralists to join. So sharing all of that because I'm hoping folks can get involved early and plan to attend the Arts Week. As soon as the schedule is finalized, I'm sure we'll get that out. And that's it.
Thanks. Councillor Zadi?
Yes, the one thing I wanted to bring up, so I went to the Parks and Rec Board meeting last week, and one of the biggest fears right now of the board is the term limits. So at the end of this year, they're going to lose 5. They're going to lose another 5 early next year. So basically, the entire board could be wiped out by February of next year. They all want to stay. What I told them is City Clerk Fitch is working on a plan, and I don't know when that would be, but it's coming, and not to fear. But there's a lot of anxiety around what do we do with these term limits and how can we maintain the institutional knowledge of the board rather than just wiping out and starting fresh. So I hope that is, I'm sure that is on your mind, City Clerk, and looking forward to hearing that.
I agree. When they impose that, it isn't as if we have people standing a block away trying to get in and sign up for these things. We always have openings and whatnot. So when all of that went down, I worried this day would come because you just need that institutional history. You need new people, and just shoving off the good institutional history and having people come on, or maybe come on if we have people sign up. So I agree with the concerns. So anxious to see what we decide to handle that. Thanks. I was busy last week, had youth advisory panel. It sounds like, Eric, you must have been making the rounds because Wednesday night you came to the uppers group and shared with them that some of the things that they had talked about was put into action, and they are such a good group. And then after they finished with that part of the meeting, they try to have a project. And so Angel Heart Project, they were making, just doing artwork on bags that people that come to Angel Heart for help and whatnot would get a bag of things that say there's others that care about you. So they didn't sign their name or anything, but we have some great artists in that group. Gosh, it was wonderful. So that was great. I then had Northwest mayors and commissioners meeting. We talked about the rail that would deal with fast tracks. We talked about the Front Range rail, and we talked about our trip to DC around transportation, and that's not going to be until April. It's always been in February, but they are waiting until April to go. There is great concern with an MOU coming from Front Range that depends on who you talk to, how they frame it, of whether they're going to include Front Range rail pieces so that at least that can get started. And fast forward to my Friday's meeting with 2 RTD directors, they said, no way it's happening. So, I was around when 2004 and went the full year going for fast tracks and convincing people to vote for it. And I will not do that with another pie in the sky maybe thing for this rail, because if we never get our interconnectedness so that we can go to Broomfield, we can go to Louisville, we can go to Boulder or Longmont, that the passenger rail will just be able to wave at it and that's it. So we have to stay diligent and don't be fooled twice. After that meeting, I raced up to St. Anthony's for ribbon cutting. They opened Monday their new cancer center. It's beautiful, high tech for helping our people. I think they said they have around 1,800 from this area that need the facility closer. Some were going clear to Central. Some use Rocky Mountain Cancer Center. So unfortunately, all of the places are have plenty of people in them, and so that new facility started taking people today. I then had Adams County Mayor's Breakfast on Friday. That's where we talked about the peak rail and how that came in, and we talked about RTD, and so nothing concrete, but just always leave our thoughts as mayors with the need for transportation. On Saturday, I had Historical Society strategic plan. Eric Oxelberger came to share that the Parks and Rec have been doing their long-range planning, and told him the top 5 things that were in that report, and one of them being history. And so he shared with them that he would love for the Historical Society and the city to do an MOU next month, and upon that, he'll write a $25,000 check to help for everyday expenses to run the society. There were tears, there was shock, there was deep breaths of relief. So a partnership that is very much welcomed. And as he said, we're not here to take over what you do, but to replace what you do would be much more than $25,000. So he was happy to meet everybody. And so thank you for helping make all of that happen. Today was our first phone call. Mayor Pro Tem wasn't on it this morning, but our first meeting with our lobbyists and our city team. And there's 140 bills that are already in the hopper. None have really been sifted through, so we don't have any to look at this moment. But the main topics are public safety, land use, mental health, worker protection, and we'll always put the bills on the website. And the bills 1330 and 274 have conflicts, and so they want to be working on some of that. Later in the day, I ran into somebody that is an officer in another city and just asked about the public safety piece, because we talked about that there's some things that Post wants to add of why a police officer can't be a police officer and would take their post away. In our morning meeting, they thought that the FOP was bringing it forward. Later, it was clarified, at least by police people, that no, FOP is trying to be proactive and be at the table as things are discussed. It's legislators that want to put things into a bill. So I've talked to City Manager Andrews, and we're going to get to what it really is, so we understand everybody's roles. So that was today. You have anything for us?
Not for this table. I do have a brief report at the dais tonight.
Okay. All right, we'll see everybody at 7.
utilized or not.
Welcome to tonight's meeting of January 13th, 2025. Because of our agenda, if you are here to speak tonight, please be sure that you go and sign up now because we may not be here until 7:15. So I just give you that opportunity now, and please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Councillor Carmelia.
Present.
Councillor DeMott.
Present.
Councillor Azadi.
Here.
Councillor Hott. Mayor McNally.
Here.
Councillor Nurmela. And Councillor Ireland.
Here.
Councillor DeMott.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to make a motion to excuse Councillor Hott and Mayor Pro Tem Nurmela till she arrives. I know she's going to be late. And then to allow participation remotely for Councillor Carmelia for both the meeting and the 2 executive sessions.
Any further questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to minutes from December 16th. Councillor DeMott.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve the minutes of the December 16th, 2024 City Council meeting as presented.
I need a second.
Second.
Councillor Azadi. It's moved and seconded to approve the minutes of December 16th. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We welcome to Westminster City Council meeting of January 13th, 2025. We appreciate your attendance and would like to remind everyone that our meetings are governed by rules of decorum, which are posted inside the chamber doors. These rules are in effect during all meetings, including breaks and transitions. To ensure a welcoming and respectful environment, we kindly ask everyone to adhere to the following expectations. No attendee shall disrupt the meeting. Threats and intimidation are strictly prohibited. Audible expressions of support or opposition for any speaker are not allowed. Signs and placards are prohibited inside the chamber. All attendees must remain seated in the designated seats and refrain from occupying aisles or blocking doorways. Thank you for your cooperation and understanding as we work together to maintain a productive and respectful meeting. If you are here to speak during public comment, which is going to be next, please sign up in the lobby because we may not be here, depending on how many people we have, until 7:15. The meeting might be over. The public comment portion of the meeting is an opportunity for the public to communicate with City Council. Each participant will be given no more than 3 minutes on any topic they choose. Public comment is not intended to be a back and forth discussion. If there is a public hearing scheduled, which there is not tonight, you would hold your comments until the public hearing is called. This evening, the city clerk has informed me that we have received 0 emails and voicemails by the deadline. And would you please call the first person?
The first speaker is Alejandro Quives.
Welcome.
I'm Alejandra. I'm from Congresswoman Brittany Pedersen's office. And as you guys all know, she just wrapped up her first term in Congress. And so I just wanted to share some of the work that she did, as well as upcoming events that our office is hosting. So during her first term in Congress, Representative Pedersen's district office in Colorado helped return over $5.3 million in federal benefits back to constituents, from receiving backlog payments from the IRS to expediting passport applications for residents of CD7, as well as she had her first bill which was signed into law, and that is the Preventing of Financing of Illegal Synthetic Drugs Act. It is legislation to combat the crisis at the source by disrupting illegal drug trafficking. This legislation will help stop the flow of illegal drugs like fentanyl that will come into our country and hold drug cartels accountable. She also introduced the hospitals as naloxone Distribution Sales Hands Act, which ensures, naloxone, a life-saving overdose reversal medication, reaches those most that are at risk of overdose. So if any of the residents of Westminster need help with any federal agency such as the IRS, passports, USCIS, veteran benefits, please do not hesitate to contact our office. Our office phone number is 303-274-7944. And now for our upcoming events, we are hosting a mobile office hour this week on Wednesday. That is going to be from 3 to 5. That'll be located in Littleton. And if any residents of Westminster are needing assistance, please come down and meet with one of the staff members from our office so we can get started and submit an inquiry on your behalf. And you don't need to be a Littleton resident. You can be a resident of Broomfield, Arvada. If you need the help, please stop by. We'd be more than happy to help. And we will also be having more resource fairs coming up this year. As soon as I have that information, I will make sure to send it all of the city council members. That way you guys can distribute it to the residents of Westminster. Thank you. Have a good night.
Perfect. Thank you. The next speaker is John Palmer. Welcome.
Thank you. Just to let you know, originally when I woke up this morning, I wasn't going to speak. After being at the grocery store this afternoon, having several residents approach me, they're concerned about the fires in Southern California. Excuse me. I want to make sure that doesn't happen here. We need to be well protected. There was a very close call 2 years ago north of here. They just want to be assured that we're in good hands. That falls on you, Mayor. I don't want to see you on the hook like the mayor of Los Angeles. That falls on Chief Burke. It's not fair to him. If they need resources, get them to them. Cut some of these other bells and whistles, unneeded things, and funnel the money where it needs to go. This also comes with our overcrowding of housing and that we are letting these developments come in. So enough said on that. Next, let's talk about our website. I invite you to open up the main page of the city website. Take a look at it. What I'm referencing is at the lower part of that web page are blocks, tiles that you can scroll through left to right. Tonight's city council meeting's not on there. Tomorrow night's planning commission meeting's not on there. The open house for the Parks and Recs is not on there. That's not even on the other calendar. Can't we do a better job? That's not being inclusive. That's not being informative. If who's ever running that page, city manager, apparently they can't do their job, they won't do their job, or they don't want to do it proficiently. Perhaps it's time we make a change there. It's not fair to the community. I rely on that page, as do many people. Again, I invite you right now to look at it before somebody has time to go in there and magically make all this stuff appear. When I left the house at 6 o'clock, it wasn't there. It's not inclusive, and it's not transparent. And again, that falls upon you as the mayor to make sure that these things are happening to whatever degree. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Tom Lampo. Welcome.
Hello. Hope everyone enjoyed their holiday season. I'm Tom Lampo, and I'm here to lift up the city of Westminster, as well as those affected by the fires in California, in prayer. Please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, in Jesus Christ's victorious name, I invite you here to the city of Westminster. You're the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You are our God, and you are always welcome here. We don't see the spiritual battle that Satan is waging against you for supremacy of all, but we feel the effects of it. We see the destruction, we feel the hate and the oppression, but our hope lies in you. In Jeremiah 29:11 it states, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." Give our city hope and a future, and let us never forget that you have everything under control. Your plans will be accomplished. You already have secured the victory. Father, we lift up our elected leaders to you. Your word clearly states you bring people to power. Daniel 2:21 states, "He changes the times and seasons. He removes kings and establishes kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding." And in Proverbs 21:1 you state, "A king's heart is like the streams of water in the Lord's hand. He directs it wherever he chooses." You have established our leaders. Wisdom is given to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. And that is what we want for our leaders. Help them to be wise and grant them understanding so your full blessing will rest upon them. Guide and direct the hearts of our leaders in all their decisions. Find their hearts pure, their intentions principled, their ways honorable, and therefore in all things guide them for the good of all the community. Father, we lift up those affected by the fires in California. There is tremendous loss. The range of emotions being experienced is heartbreaking. Your word in Psalm 34:18 states, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." Brokenhearted and crushed in spirit describe those experiencing the loss from the fires. Be close to them, bring comfort to them, build them up, and let them live to fight another day. Be the word of encouragement to their ears, the backbone they do not have, and the Savior they need. You are our God, and we are your people. In Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen. Thank you guys, and have a nice night.
Thank you. The next speaker is Alan Farb. Welcome.
Good evening. First, however we can support our California families now suffering, let us do so as a community. I had intended to speak tonight about the city's response to our unhoused residents living outside during the below freezing temperatures and severe weather, and how it certainly seemed counter to the good deeds and proactive and fiscally intelligent responses that this council had enacted for 2024 and 2025 on behalf of our unhoused women and men, and yes, even in some cases children. But after a frank and meaningful conversation with Councilor Azadi during his office hours last Monday, and having had a phone conversation with Parks, Recreation, and Libraries Acting Director Eric Otzelberger, who also today followed up with me in a voicemail noting that I presume are additional, perhaps different and potentially life and limb-saving responses from the city with regard to those residents who are literally left out in the cold. I hope for some earnest progress and hopefully consequential outcomes. Yet I understand the city only opens the MAC as a warming center at 0 degrees, a temperature which still remains dangerous. Mission Arvada, for example's warming center, activates at 20 degrees. I want you to know, too, that it does take time for the unhoused to gain trust in the city. It's taken me several years of consistent weekly outreach to have people put their trust in me. It is consistency in your actions that will make the city and these residents better understand and trust each other, and the hope that with the right actions, more people will be able to exit homelessness. And I want you to know, too, that the city's Homeless Navigator program is productive and will be even more productive and effective once all 4 navigators are on board this year. So thank you, Council. And I particularly want you to know that Navigator Haley, only using first name, is what some of you might call a godsend. She's honest, straightforward, consistent, professional, and human. Just this past Thursday at her mini resource fair at Irving Street Library, 2 of her clients told me that without her, they'd be lost, and that she's saved them. So Councilor, city staff, continue to do your best like Navigator Haley. Be consistent, be human. When people like her and people like Councilor Azadi and those other councilors who I know take the time and deep dive effort to work on behalf of even the least cared for people in our city, we will all reap the benefits. Thank you.
Thank you. That was our last speaker. Thank you. City Manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a brief report this evening. If I could have the first slide. There it is. First and foremost, thank you to our speakers tonight from our community for speaking. We do follow up on everything raised. Specifically, we have pulled up the city website, and thank you to the speaker that raised there are missing meetings on there. Can't explain it. We'll have that looked into and addressed. I would say that there is a lot of hope at the end of our journey, because we are working on beta testing right now our brand new city website, and that will go live in this quarter of this year. So do appreciate the feedback. Our current site needs to function right up until the moment that we switch to our new one. So know that that's heard, and we will find out why that happened and have it corrected. I do want to make a note before I begin in response to another speaker following up regarding the warming shelter at the MAC. I will note for our community that staff is monitoring the temperatures heading into this coming weekend, and we do see a forecast for low temperatures and possible snowfall. So do know that staff is watching that closely and is preparing the appropriate steps to activate that cold weather emergency shelter if the temperatures drop. All right, next slide, please. I would note on tonight's agenda for this evening, we have 4 items on consent agenda. That's what the mayor was referring to with respect to the length of this meeting. Following this meeting, we will move to the adjacent room for a post-meeting study session. In that, we will receive a presentation from staff on best practices in budget development. And this is the beginning of our process for preparing the 2026 budget, and primarily in Q1, working with City Council to get feedback and direction on how we would modify and adjust our budget process to suit City Council's needs and objectives. So this is the first step this evening, rolling right out in January with reviewing the best practices amongst our peers, and then talking about some things that Council may wish us to follow up on. We then have 2 executive sessions. One will be the discussion of the Woman Creek property, that's a city-owned property, and the second will be discussion of a personnel matter, and that will be the quarterly check-ins for each of the city manager, the presiding judge, and the city attorney. Next slide, please. This week we do have some meetings happening. There are 2. Tuesday, this January 14th, that's tomorrow, is a planning commission meeting that is scheduled. That will begin at 7 o'clock right here in City Council chambers. Then on Wednesday, January 15th, we have a special permit and license board meeting, and that will also be here in City Council chambers, and that one starts at 6 p.m. Please note that Monday the 20th, so next Monday, is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and all of City Hall administrative offices will be closed, and there will be no City Council meeting on Monday, January 20th. Next slide, please. For next week, also no scheduled meetings in the evening. This is a rare week for us next week. There are no public meetings scheduled related to City Hall. I would note this would be a great opportunity, also in response or following up to some of our speakers tonight. The City of Westminster has deployed a wildland team to California. I want to let you know that they have been assigned to a strike team and are operating in the Palisade area near Malibu. So we are definitely wishing our professionals in our fire service to be safe, and do appreciate their contributions to the efforts in California to help that community. I would also note that the Westminster strike team includes wildland resources from West Metro Fire, Thornton Fire, Windsor Fire, and Denver Fire. So a concerted effort from the Front Range led by Westminster to support our California friends and family. Next slide, please. For our next meeting of City Council, that will be here in Council Chambers starting at 6:30 p.m. on Monday, January 27th. So 1 week following next Monday, we have presentations that evening, Employee Service Awards. We also have a presentation by Just Serve for recognition of the city's volunteer program. That will be followed by review of 3 consent agenda items and a public hearing, which is regarding the consent for the dissolution to the 144th Avenue Metropolitan district numbers 1 and 2. And then in post-meeting study session, we will be reviewing the fire department's 2025 budget presentation. So as a follow-up to tonight's meeting, each department director will then be coming before City Council and presenting their department current staffing levels, resourcing levels, and needs moving into the 2026 budget preparation with City Council. So this is the first one, and Fire Chief Burke will lead us in our first departmental presentation. That will be followed by a presentation from CIRSA regarding effective governance, and that will be led by Sam Light of CIRSA, and that's a very valuable program that Mr. Light agrees to do for Westminster on a regular basis. Next slide, please. So that's it for my report tonight, Mayor. You can contact me at any time at 303-658-2003. And for some folks who have tried to contact me recently, I was out of the office for a brief time away over the holidays. I appreciate your patience. I did get backlogged, and I will get back to each of you if you've called me. I would also note you can email me, jandrews@westminsterco.gov, and you can follow the city at any one of our 4 social media accounts. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor DeMont?
Thank you, Mayor. Real quick question, Manager Andrews, and it is around one of the speaker topics with the wildfires. I know after the Marshall fires that we had a presentation to the council at that point about what mitigation efforts, and we've talked about that a couple times since then. That might be useful if you could float that up to the current council, since not everybody was here. The other thing that I wanted to see if you could get us information on, I did have a resident ask me about our fire hydrants and how often we test, and they had stated that they used to see it and they feel like they hadn't seen it in a while, and I really couldn't speak to how often we test those, so that might be useful information both for the public and for us to understand, so that they are assured that we're prepared.
Thank you, Councillor. I will follow up on both of those matters, and I think there would be a great opportunity when our wildland team returns from California. We can do a deconstruct with City Council and talk about lessons learned in California and also the steps that we have taken. And in the meantime, I will get you information on our hydrant flushing program.
Councillor Azadi?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for Chief Burke related to following the ballot question that didn't pass last November. We know that there are needs. I'm curious if council will receive from the department what those are, what those budget requests will be for 2026 during the 2025 budget process. So if you can elucidate on that.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Azadi. Eric Burke, Fire Chief. To answer your question, at the presentation on the 27th, we'll focus on the 2025 budget, and to give some detail behind the budget request there, we will also have the opportunity to review some organizational goals, which will speak to infrastructure, some potential staffing challenges, and other future needs. As far as what will come forward to City Council for consideration will be part of the official 2026 budget presentation.
Okay, just want to make sure that we do have that discussion of the CapEx needs that you guys have. So thank you.
Councillor Ireland?
Hi, I just want to thank those that came out to speak tonight. I know it's cold, and I appreciate you keeping us abreast of what the citizens are concerned about. I just wanted to note that there is a historical board meeting on the 22nd at 7 o'clock here at the building. That was not on the calendar either, but I know it's on my calendar, so I was just going to mention that. Thank you.
Councillor Carmelia?
No comment, thank you.
That brings us to City Council comments. Anyone? Councillor DeMont?
Thank you, Mayor. Again, thank you everybody who came out and spoke to us tonight. I'm excited for the new year to start. And with that, this week on Thursday will be my first town hall, which is the Policy and Pilsner. I hold every third Thursday at Cocopelli Beer Company. We'll be there at 6:30 till about 8 o'clock. So if you have anything you want to come discuss, or if you just want to come hang out with other community members, it's always a good time. So we hope we see you there.
Mayor Pro Tem. Just wanted to say thank you to my colleagues for allowing me to arrive late. I did have a work commitment, and so I will catch up on the public input that was provided earlier today. And since I didn't get to give my update, I'll just say that I am planning to attend Dr. Cog this week, and I'm sure there's other things on my calendar as well. And I just wish our firefighters all the best out there in California, and I really appreciate that we've sent folks over there, and please let us know if we can support them in any way.
That brings us to consent agenda. Councillor DeMott.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve consent agenda items 8A through 8D.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve items 8A through D. Is there any further discussion? Roll call, please. Councillor Carmelia.
Yes.
Councillor DeMott.
Yes.
Councillor Azadi.
Yes.
Mayor McNally. Yes. Mayor Pro Tem Nurmela.
Yes.
And Councillor Ireland.
Yes.
The motion passes on a 6-0 vote. And I'd just like to thank everyone that either re-upped for their place on their board or new ones that are being placed as alternates. Thank you for applying, and we still have places that are open if you're hearing this and so desire to serve. It is 7:26 and the meeting is adjourned. We will go into our post-meeting.
Mayor,
yep.
Can we have the city attorney read the executive sessions?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. The two executive sessions that are proposed for City Council tonight. The first is an executive session to consult with the City Attorney on legal issues involving the deed for the Woman Creek parcel pursuant to Westminster Municipal Code 111.3C3 and 8, as well as Colorado Revised Statute 24.6.402.4b.
I will ask each councillor to state your name and that you're willing to go into executive session.
Obi, is that a yes?
Councillor Camelia.
Claire Carmelia, yes.
Dave DeMott, yes.
Nancy McNally, yes.
Sarah Nurmela, yes.
Christine Ireland, yes.
And the second executive session that's proposed tonight is an executive session discussion of a personnel matter, the quarterly check-in for the city manager, presiding judge, and city attorney pursuant to Westminster Municipal Code, Section 111.3C1, and Colorado Revised Statute 24.6.402.4f.
Same.
Obi, is that a yes?
Claire Carmelia, yes.
Dave DeMott, yes.
Nancy McNally, yes.
Sarah Nurmela, yes.
Christine Ireland, yes.
Thank you. It is now 7:28 and we are adjourned into our post session.
place in downtown Erie that I can get really good
See next to the recycle center coffee station. They might
Yeah.
have coffee over there. I don't know.
Okay, welcome to our post session, and our first presentation is best practices in budget.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Chris Lindsay, Assistant City Manager, and joining me tonight is Erin Ferreter, our Policy and Budget Administrator. Since Erin's joined our team, we've been trying to have her be the focal point for our budget conversations with you, but I'm going to do more of the speaking tonight because I've got a bit of background working with the specific budget development types we're going to speak this evening, and then Erin's going to follow up at the end with our process moving forward, some question and answer. I would ask you to hold your questions till the end of the presentation, and then I hope we can have a fruitful discussion. I think Mayor and Council, you've all heard or talked about a number of different budget development types like zero-based or priority-based in recent months, and we all know a bit about these. And we think it's important at a staff level to provide you an overview of current practices and where the field of government budget is moving to. And I think it's also timely because that piece of where we're moving to, the Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA, has been undergoing a project over the last 12 months or so around rethinking budgeting, around infrastructure, revenue, really connecting to a transparent budget process that's strategic. And a lot of the conversations that we've heard from you and we've had internally at a staff level really fit into this conversation. Our budget team brings to you an extensive background. I was adding it up to prepare for a little bit, adding it up to prepare for this evening. Our team itself has over 50 years of direct budget development experience across 10 organizations in 9 states and 1 state government. If you throw in our 2 deputy city managers, you add another about 40 years to that. I tell you this to say that we've got significant direct experiences utilizing the practices that we're going to describe this evening. And even as we went through preparing this, I learned that one of our budget coordinators utilized a different budget approach in a year in another municipality in another state called program-based budgeting. And we had a discussion about some of the pros and cons around that. So we've even learned things internally in preparing for this. I have learned things internally preparing for this. As we talk about the ways of putting together a budget, we want to take a step back and go to best practices. A budget really is an allocation of scarce resources, right? There's only so many dollars and so many FTEs to go around. And we're utilizing the process to decide what projects and programs should be funded to provide critical public services. What's on the screen right now is actually from a document called the Recommended Budget Practices, a framework for improved state and local budgeting. It's almost a textbook for those of us that do budget. This was put out by the National Advisory Council on State and Local Budgeting, which includes the Government Finance Officers Association, the City Managers Association, and I think critically it also includes the NLC, the Conference of Mayors, and many other professional government organizations. This is just one of about 200 pages of budget best practices, but it highlights the discussion that we'll have this evening around the type, presentation, and time period of the budget. This indicates a budget should choose the type of budget that best fits its needs. A government should choose the type of budget that best fits its needs. And this can have a significant practical impact on a government's approach to planning, control, and overall management. And this group and the Finance Officers Association stresses that it needs to fit local need. I also mentioned the time period of the budget because that's something we've also discussed. The city had a period of time where we used a 2-year budget, and COVID, and since we've used a 1-year budget. not planning to cover the discussion around 1 or 2 year budget tonight, but I think you'll see as we move through, some of the budget development types we're going to talk about lend to a longer form of planning or a shorter form of planning. Planning to hit 4 different budget development approaches this evening. These are the ones that are most prevalent in use or most prevalent in conversations. And we're going to provide real-world experience and feedback from both myself and I mentioned our team on the usage of these approaches really in action. The first I want to mention is really the classical form of creating a government budget, and that's a line item budget. I'll hit this in detail in a later slide, but the city currently utilizes what I would call a modified line item based approach to develop its budget. A line item budget is just what it sounds like. It's a series of object accounts or line items that are really input focused, right? So purchasing of capital expenditures or supplies, salaries, and benefits. It focuses on what's purchased as opposed to what the success outcome is. The inputs include dollars, but also critically include employees or FTEs as we go through the process. The criticism of line item budgeting is that it's seen as incremental. You often start with the previous year's budget and move forward from that. But being incremental, it provides stability and predictability in the provision of critical government services. There's a lot of work that's done on the types of budget development approaches, and try to pull a lot of, again, that best practice information. Everything that's up here on this slide is directly from the Government Finance Officers Association, and specifically their Rethinking Budgeting project. When they described the line item budget, they talked about it being simple, easy to understand, but including that accountability in the form of line item spending controls, that it has predictable results in terms of how much is allocated and to what purpose, and that's very transparent and easy to understand. And I think, interestingly, GFOA talked about line item budgeting being flexible to accommodating and changing political priorities. A survey of GFOA members highlighted that 80% described their budget as line item, and over half said those were incremental budgets. And that's actually folks that received the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. So it is the highest, I would say, highest achieving of those local government budget creation. So I think we're in line with a lot of what's done out there. We've also done a lot of work with our executive leadership team around our budget approach. And I asked them recently, of the others that we're talking about or others that are out in the field these days, what have folks used? And amongst our leadership team, all had exclusively worked with organizations that do line item budgeting. Abby, do I need to hold for a moment?
I think we're good now.
Okay, thank you. The second budget approach I want to highlight this evening is the zero-based budget. It's in really tiny print on the right-hand side, but I wanted to find something that connected back to President Carter. The top of it says, Mr. Carter tried it in Georgia and he liked it. And really the rest of the article talks about bringing it to Washington. So President Carter brought zero-based budgeting to Washington, D.C. and our federal government in a time period where there was mass concern about the cost efficiency of providing government services. Zero-based budgeting is really building a budget from the ground up, starting from zero. Zero is the base every year, therefore you get the name zero-based budget. Each function and program within a department or an organization is reviewed, and all expenses, not just those incremental increases, must be justified. And typically you use decision packages to do that. Zero-based budgeting is often seen as a way to reduce budgets or reduce the size of government, and that's many of the conversations that you hear these days about zero-based budget and its usage. Keep going back to our Government Finance Officers Association. They provide really good information. So this is a table they put together around some zero-based budget approaches and some advantages and disadvantages of each of those approaches. In this report, they identified that very few governments use zero-based budgeting approaches in recent years. And of the one that's on the left, that real textbook zero-based budgeting approach, they identified 2 governments that use that. I want to talk a little bit about the time that goes into this. You see that amount of work and efficiency gains and paperwork intensiveness and the disadvantages. I think several of you know that prior to joining the city, I worked for Jefferson County, right next door, doing budget work. And coming out of the Great Recession, Jeffco utilized zero-based budgeting. In terms of time, zero-based budget requires a lot of time from your budget staff, from your department staff, certainly your executive leadership, and also a lot of time from the governing board. Jefferson County, which has full-time county commissioners, in consultation with the commissioners, there was a decision made that we would only do 2 departments per year through a zero-based budget development approach due to the amount of time necessary to go through. And to go back in my memory bank, but I would estimate that the commissioners spent about 80 hours between those 2 departments doing budgetary review. So that's just a little insight into how time intensive that was. After a single year of doing zero-based budgeting, the commissioners decided to forego that process due to a lack of real return on investment for the time spent going through that level of detail with the budgets. Move over to another budget approach that has a start in Jefferson County. This is priority-based budgeting, and I believe, Mayor, you heard about this at the National League of Cities conference. Priority-based budgeting has been popular over the last 2 decades, and it actually started at Jefferson County, and I used it fairly extensively there. Priority-based budget requires that you identify each individual program or individual service that's provided or cost center and assign a full cost to it. With that individual program, full cost, you use a scoring methodology, and you allocate resources based on really the score and how that service achieves goals and objectives that the community values the most. I want to highlight that full cost because this is often difficult when programs utilize the same or similar resources. So think of a building like City Hall, an internal service like human resources or fleet, shared equipment. You have to come up with a methodology to split the cost of those into your frontline operating units, which is time intensive on a staff level. And then you get to scoring. I did want to highlight, that's the ICMA Public Management magazine from June 2008. I still have my well-worn copy, and that's our court and administration building for Jefferson County on the front when priority-based budgeting was really highly used at Jeffco. We scored programs, and I think the common practice with priority-based budgeting is to score programs and then rank them on their connection to different items within the strategic plan, a legal mandate, whether the federal government, state government, or you as a city council says we have to provide a program, the public's reliance on a program, the cost recovery, which often looks different because you're looking at, again, that full cost of providing a service. demand for the service, and then also the capacity to serve, and other organizations that provide the same or similar service. The county moved away from priority-based budgeting in part because it became associated with budget cuts, and it was often a painful discussion. I think that's an important point to make here, that how you seek to use the budget process or what you seek to achieve can drive really a decision around what a best budget process is for city or any other organization. Lastly, I want to talk about budgeting for outcomes. Budgeting for outcomes has really come to the forefront in the last decade or so. There's even a book that's been written about the experiences of implementing it in Baltimore for those of us who work on budget and need to even read about it. It's really good information about how they utilized budgeting for outcomes coming out of the Great Recession. It's really a step-by-step guide to how they implemented it in Baltimore. Budgeting for outcomes is seen as an efficient, transparent, and data-driven budget process. But to get to that data-driven budget process, you really need some tools like performance management and performance accountability to be successful, to have a successful foundation to build upon. Think about the New York City mayor's office and city stat and those hard conversations about performance in different parts of their organization. These are really critical part of creating a successful budgeting for outcomes system. But moving to this and creating performance accountability systems like that can take sometimes years to be created and implemented to be successful. A large piece of budgeting for outcomes is results teams. And that's a community engagement tool and prioritization tool that combines staff and folks in the community to make recommendations around how you align resources and results packages and proposals, how you align those resources and make recommendations to the City Council. I mentioned Baltimore. There's also good examples of this in Boston and Fort Collins. And because Fort Collins has been really a leader in this space, our budget team has spent a lot of time learning from the experiences of our colleagues in Fort Collins. And we've sought to implement some of their key concepts in our budget process the past few years. I wanted to pull some real life examples. So this came straight from the Fort Collins budget document. On the left, they show an allocation of dollars by fund is the color, but then by the results area on the left-hand side, so you can see those. I do want to highlight on the right, again, the time spent on this process. So Fort Collins utilizes a 2-year budget. And to accomplish that and budgeting for outcomes, they spend about 6 months on strategic planning and then 10 months doing budgeting. One of the things that I've learned from working and learning with the folks at Fort Collins is they have a very strict adherence to a 2-year budget, much more so than I've seen here at the city. That's not a bad thing. I find that the city is very responsive and doesn't want to be constrained by looking 30 months out to the services that'll be needed from when you adopt a budget. In my time here with the city, we've seek to be able to move quickly on things like homelessness, co-responders, and reorganizations during what would have in Fort Collins been a locked-in budget process. I think these are just pros and cons of some different approaches. I talked earlier about the city utilizing a line item budget approach, and we have a modified form of that. We do programmatic tracking within our line item operating budget, but we've also introduced some concepts around priority-based budgeting, especially within our capital planning process. We used many of the concepts in consultation with our city engineer's office from the priority-based budgeting process. Actually, when we created first couple of drafts of the proposed 2025 capital plan, we used a similar scoring methodology to align with goals and outcomes. We take all of this information and certainly the feedback we hear from you and the community and also our staff internally to evaluate and improve every year. And I can confidently say to you that every year that I've been here, we've made strategic improvements in our process. Lastly, on this front, I want to add, we canvassed our neighbors over the last week to confirm the type of budget processes they utilized. And while many of them talk about a priority-based approach or a program-based approach that's based on strategic plans or priorities, at their core, we believe that most of those are incremental in actual practice as they develop their budget every year. And I think that aligns with what you're seeing from the city and a lot of other organizations out there. I want to turn it over to Aaron to talk about what we've heard from you and the community and our next steps.
Good evening, Erin Ferreter, Policy and Budget Administrator. Before I begin, I just want to thank City Council, City Manager Andrews, and ELT for their feedback and willingness to evaluate our current practices to find opportunities for improvement. This is my second year participating in the debriefing process. After the first one, we made adjustments to the 2025 budget process, such as, but not limited to, a budget town hall, having a formal community request process, and shifting the timing of our budget retreat with City Council earlier rather than later in the process. In the recent budget review, several 2026 budget development focuses were identified, beginning with the discussions tonight. Focuses we have heard are community engagement. Again, we plan on hosting a budget town hall, conducting a formal community request process. Something new that we will be building in our 2026 budget as an appendix amendment, I'm not sure how it will fit technically, is that we will be responding to each of our 2025 community requests as an accountability loop. We said we would do certain things, how we would address them, and we will come back and update each of those 70 plus requests of what we did to achieve or what our next steps are in working towards accomplishing what we said we were going to. Our attempt is to build transparency and trust with the community on the things that we say we are going to do. Department engagement. Again, as City Manager Andrews indicated, that begins tonight and until March 31st. Each council meeting will have a department presentation about their 2025 budget to explain where they are today, what their goals are for 2025, just to bring us all onto the same page. We will also continue to bring the departments in our budget development conversations and our retreats and our workshops as we move forward, and also within our team building and the strategic plan retreat, which is planned the beginning of February. Performance measures. Staff will be launching a city performance measure dashboard to provide transparent view into how each department works to achieve its goals and deliver exceptional services to the community. Be something that'll be depending on the performance measure, updated weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually, just depending on what that tool is. We want to put that out there so it's not just a twice a year report to City Council and the community, it's something on our webpage, which then leans into the next one of our transparency portal. It ties right into that. In our upper right-hand corner, which may change with our new webpage, we have our transparency portal, which shows our financial documents. You can go into OpenGov and you can see on a monthly basis our revenue and expenses for each of our departments. You can click on each one and see drill down of what has been spent. Capital planning. We know we need to continue to plan and explore various funding and infrastructure projects as we move forward. That begins and builds on our current 5-year capital plan. Also with full cost budgeting, understanding the comprehensive, completing comprehensive review of our total expenses. Also, we'll be launching and beginning our cost of service study with our utility. That our contractor, our consultant has been identified, and we're getting ready to have our kickoff meeting soon that will identify our milestones. Once we've identified where we're going, we'll make sure we will be in touch with City Council on a regular basis, depending on the cadence that makes sense for you and that team, to bring you along in that process. This is just another visual review of for the next 10, and then we'll add November. I couldn't get November, December on it just yet, but we'll be touching budget each month in one way, shape, or form to build our engagement, our communication, and our understanding of where we are and the goals we want to achieve with our 2026 budget.
Before we move into questions and conversation around this tonight, I did want to put this out there. Staff has looked internally at calendars and has identified a potential date for a May budget workshop that we could do on a Saturday. Mayor, I know you don't like May, but we identified May 3rd, which I'll say is the end of the last week of April, as a day that we could have a deep dive of budget prior to the staff really beginning our budget development process. If council is open and sees value in that.
Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Catching me early.
Before Mother's Day.
I think that's a great idea.
And building on that, our thought process is that if we can come in May and have a full day conversation, we would come back in the beginning of June, as we did last year, and we would confirm our conversation, our goals, and our objectives. And then in June and July, and the beginning of August, staff would work to build our budgets based upon those agreed upon goals.
When are you looking at doing community?
April 17th was the date that COMS had shared with us that they had discussed with City Council. Our team is available to support. As we were jotting down, that was one of my comments and questions that we'll need to connect on, making sure that we are achieving that the goals out of that. How did last year go? Do we need to change up what that conversation, that format looks like?
That is Holy Week.
It is. So it is a tough.
Yep.
We are aware.
Is there anything wrong with the next week?
We can talk with comms and see if there's an option.
Or I know part of the reason they were looking at the date they were, it's because everybody has something with their liaisons or whatever, and I don't know how many. If it's something like this versus going to a liaison, this will win out every time. So if somebody has to miss an inclusivity board or whatever, they can catch up on that through the minutes that are taken at these meetings. So I just want to share that we are more flexible than maybe the calendars look like. If you want to take another look.
On Holy Week. I'd
Yeah.
rather do it the week after or week before.
Is that 10?
I'll be in DC with Northwest.
Okay, we can take that feedback and back and work with our teams on that. Thank you. Am I seeing nods on the May 3rd date?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I heard Councilor Carmelia virtually. So that I think is one of the key questions we had tonight. Certainly, we're looking at answering any questions you have about the topics tonight, or have any conversation that you would like to.
Mayor Pro Tem, and then Councilor DeMott.
One, thank you for this presentation. It was helpful to actually look at the different styles of approaches. I did see, even on that first slide, something called like modified zero-based. I'm kind of, I don't know if there's a clear definition for that, or what would that be if not fully zero-based.
Yeah, so I think of it as modified because we use some elements of programmatic alignment within our line item budget. It's therefore it's not that traditional line item budget. So to me, it's a bit modified from what you would normally see. Some of those elements we've introduced the past couple of years to really move that forward.
Okay, yeah, my experience too is only with line item primarily. But one thing that I did experience recently was doing a bit of a zero-based analysis of just every one of those line items. What do we actually need with the intent to actually cut? And it did result in us cleaning up we're getting closer to better utilization of our budget. So I'm curious to know, out of what we budget, what is our percentage that we actually spend on average?
I don't have that off the top of my head. We can get that. I think certainly we'll be looking at 2024's results coming up. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have that off the top of my head.
Okay, because I don't know what the best. Not remembering what the best practice percentage is to try and get closer to the actual expenditures. But I mean, one thing I did see just through that exercise I described was, wow, we're not fully spending some of these, but we continue to ask for the same amount in the line items. So scrutinizing those was actually really helpful and kind of starting from there with the goal of being closer to actual expenditures.
Yeah. So we had a lot of hard conversations. I think this budget cycle around, is all the funding that's needed there. We had that with the capital discussion, right? Is there existing capital funding that's been carried over that we can use rather than adding new funding to it? So I think we do a pretty good job in that area. And it's certainly, in previous years, we talked a lot about carryover. It's been one of my goals to reduce that every year. And part of that is the amount that's not spent. So I think we've been reducing that, but we'll report back on it.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Dumont.
Excuse me. A couple of things. So no questions, but just some feedback and thoughts going into the process. One, on the budget town hall, just food for thought. I think that last time it was good. It kind of at times turned into what do you want if we had a magic money tree kind of conversation? And clearly we don't. We have real needs and real gaps. As pointed out earlier by Councillor Azadi with the firefighter stuff and that initiative not passing. So it would be nice going into that to really share with the public and get their input on some of the levers that we're actually going to have to pull. It would also be nice for them to know where there is opportunity for things, because I know we put certain dollars aside for community projects and HOAs and things like that. So for them to have that better understanding as part of the information on the table or openings, I think would be super helpful, just so they don't go away feeling like we, had them talk about great things that we're not able to do, I guess is really my concern, or just feedback. So a couple other things. You had mentioned the cost of service analysis that we're going to go into, obviously an area that's near and dear to me with our utility and the water. So I just want to, re-emphasize that my desire in that and any of the budgeting, this really kind of goes to what Mayor Protem was just talking about, is, looking at ways that we fine-tune service for savings versus what does it cost us the way we do it today. I know in my business life, that is something I often have to do. And usually if I'm going to go for savings because I, have something that came up that wasn't in the budget, is, are there licenses we're paying for because we always have that we're not using anymore? So I think that's the right conversation. So it sounds like we are doing that, and I'm pleased. But, in an organization this big, and even in small organizations, there's often those things that people kind of forget that they started paying for, and they just kind of keep renewing. So I think that's a really good call out that you brought up. Timely, I've had a couple of resident coffees and lunches recently where this topic has been top of mind. To be frank, I think it's probably because there's an election coming, so there's a lot of people talking about things like, and I know Councilor Ireland has brought it up before in terms of FTEs versus our growth. And I had a really great conversation with a resident, and it kind of went into, sometimes those FTEs are because they're state mandated. A good example of that is body cam. I think that I heard we have something like 4 new FTEs just because of that state mandate. Doesn't mean that's the wrong thing, but the reason I bring it up tonight is I think as part of the process, and I know that we're going to want to hear it, is, instead of looking at historic numbers of here's how many people the city was and how many people we have now, to get a better understanding of why we added those people. And I know we've done some of that work over the last probably 4 years, but I feel like it's always been reactive to council questions, which have been good questions. But like, how do we know that that's kind of been on the table for the last 3 or 4 years? Do we stay ahead of it? Because I know that there's going to probably be things from the state that are going to continue to come down, or things that maybe were voted on 3 sessions ago that are just now hitting us. So I just wanted to, going into studying up for this, I had those things written down that I wanted to bring to the forefront, so that I think it will kind of help the process versus us asking those questions, because I know they're going to come up, so that you're kind of prepared for them. Thank you.
Councilor Ireland?
I also think the public needs to know what the real needs are instead of what we want. The real needs need to be spelled out, how much they are, like we're talking about fires. That might be a need that we need instead of some of this other frivolous stuff that we want. We got to separate that. I think we're getting to the point, especially with the state in the almost $1 billion deficit, that we're going to have to think about tightening the strings too. Technology. Are we up to speed on technology? Because there is technology that takes the place of adding another person. I'm sorry to say. But we don't need to keep adding people if there's technology out there that can do it for us. There's a lot of AI now. It can do a lot. My daughter actually is a programmer for an accounting program for AI. So there is a lot of things that AI can do that we may not need another person to do. So we need to look at that too.
Councilor Rosati?
Thanks for the presentation. I think you heard us during the budget development, the post-budget meeting. We had a lot of ideas. The question I had for you right now is related to reliance versus demand. So what's the difference? On one of these, I think it was priority-based budgeting. There's resident reliance and then there's resident demand. How would you differentiate those two?
So I think that's a really good question. I think each organization that uses a priority-based system, right, defines these and how they would score on each of these. At Jefferson County, we used a 0 to 5 scale. And actually, we only used demand. We didn't use both. So in some places, it's an either or. Reliance or need to provide the service versus demand being the entire universe of folks who could utilize that service. I think of some of those in terms of the provision of city versus private service, right? So something like recreation center, fitness programs, there's a larger demand than just what the city provides. That's where I think about.
So demand meaning more like market wide versus city provided?
Yes.
Okay. And that just leads to my comment on this overall. I love outcomes-based anything. So when that version, I'm not advocating for changing how we do it, but I think there are elements of all of these budget development processes that we should definitely be incorporating into what we do now. One of them is outcomes based, where what would help me in the budget process, because I'm very quantitative, and I think it clears things up when I see metrics, right? Especially if it's outcomes based metrics, as to what are we actually trying to achieve with X service or X program. We don't really focus on outcomes very often, or at least in this context of what I'm talking about. So I would love to see more metrics, and at least at the council level, like showing us more, hey, here's what we're trying to achieve. These are these four metrics. Here's where we're at. And then here's the numbers we're trying to get to. That would help me strategize better, especially in the budget process, as to, okay, well, what capital expenditures, what level would help to achieve the outcome that we actually want, right? We did that with the PQI, for example, right? That's a good example. But I think there's lots of other areas where we don't really track metrics, outcomes-based metrics very often, and I would love to see that be a bigger focus. And related to the budgeting, the priority-based budgeting, we do that kind of, right, but we're modified line item, but we do incorporate some priority-based here and there. I like to see all these, all five, just kind of all the best practices of each one incorporated rather than us shifting the entire process. I think we can incorporate a lot of elements. Thanks.
I appreciate your feedback. I look forward to being able to share that performance measures dashboard with you that our staff is working on. I've been previewing that the last couple of weeks, and I think that'll get to some of what you're asking. Certainly, it's a first iteration, so I think it'll take some work to really dive into what you and the community are looking for. But I think that'll start the conversation. And I do think we have a lot of metrics. We just don't do a good job of reporting those, or certainly aligning those in our budget process. And that's something we can do much better on.
And that performance dashboard, would that be a standalone web page where anyone can access it?
Yes.
And will it be outcomes based, or just tracking all that we can with performance? Because not all performance metrics are outcomes.
It'll probably be a combination. And once we, like, as Chris indicated, this is our first time doing it in this format. Some will miss the mark and we need to adjust, and some will hit the nail right on the head. So it'll most likely will be a combination, and then based upon feedback, we'll adjust. And that's the beauty of it being a real-time document and seeing it live rather than just twice a year, is that we can start to tweak and build upon it based upon the feedback we've received.
And that's why staff is so great, because I think we're so flexible. We're so reactive. Not reactive in a bad way, but we are, what's the word you used earlier? We're the process currently accommodates random changes, right? And what, market changes and council changes priorities. I think we're nimble. We're very nimble, and that's why staff's done a great job with this.
I like that, nimble.
Councilor Carmelia?
Thank you. I have similar thoughts as Councilor Azadi, so thank you for that. It seems to me that, it leans, first of all, thank you for providing this presentation to begin with, because I think that when council asked to be more involved in the process of the budget, I think that staff heard our underlying question, which was, we don't just want the what, we want the how. And so I really appreciate you diving into this and giving us the chance to have insight into how we're doing things. It feels to me that a priority-based budget makes a lot of sense, because we should be outcomes focused. And yet I heard some of those cons as well, the time and the money that might take. But it sounds like right now we do already have a hybrid approach, and that's what keeps us, to Councilor Zadi's point, nimble. Is that right? We are using a hybrid approach at this time.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so I guess if the question out of this presentation is, do we want to change anything in what we're doing? My response would be no. I think that it seems to me we're doing a good job, because we can adjust to requests. And I think in a city like Westminster, we need to be able to provide room for those adjustments. So while I really like the way a priority-based budget looks, because it's focused on the goals and the outcomes. I think hybrid is the best approach because it keeps us in a shorter timeline. But that does bring up the timeline. Do we want to discuss whether we want to be moving towards a 1 year or a 2 year timeline? Because if we did things in a 2 year, we would be saving a lot of cost.
Possibly. You want that discussion tonight or no?
I am absolutely open to having that discussion tonight.
And I'll just go ahead and say, since I'm still on, I am a proponent of doing things at least in a 2 year cycle, because if we did so, we would have the same council on. Well, depending on how those, what the years look like and when we got going. And obviously you want to be able to accommodate for folks coming on. But as long as we have the same folks in the room, I feel like a 2 year cycle provides for efficiencies, and yet it's still short enough to be fairly reactive.
Councillor Ireland?
I don't know if 2 years is nimble enough, but my problem is with the reactive way we're doing it now. I like to see we need money. So we're saying we need more money for the fire department. Where are we taking that from? We need to know where we're taking it from. Like all these things that we want to cut or things we want to spend more money on, where are we taking it from? And that's my problem with the budget. I'm not seeing where we're taking it from. I'm just seeing us adding to what we're spending. I want to see where the cuts are coming to cover whatever else we decided to spend it on. I mean, people in our city do not have an endless supply of money. Like he said, there is not a money tree. We can't just keep raising their taxes every time we have a big idea. And so that's the problem with not doing it line by line. Do we really need this? Is this something we were using last year that we really needed? I mean, if we go line by line, there might be things we can cut on that line or scale it back and use it somewhere else that's a bigger priority. But we can't just cover everything. We can't just keep raising people's taxes to do it.
Yeah, for Tim.
Councillor Ireland's point just made me think of another thing that would be helpful as we have the departments come in is if they can discuss to some extent how they might, how their budgets might benchmark against other similar communities. To the point of, I know we're not looking all the time at apples to apples. And so to the extent it makes sense to do some level of comparison, and maybe not all departments, do that or make sense to do that. I also understand that we're at a different period of time in our life as a city. We're not a teenager anymore. We're, if I want to really equate us to some age, some wonderful age.
We're adulting.
We are adults for sure. And so that time frame that we're in will impact who we might benchmark against. I think that's important to consider. If we're an aging community now we've gotten to that point, we do need to think about new infrastructure. And so what are communities of similar age doing, like other fire departments? So that would just be to the extent, again, that it's possible. And then I used to work here when we were doing 2 year budgets, and I'm trying to remember, was it a bad thing or not? Did it lock us in too much? But I feel like, you can still be nimble with a 2 year budget where, with supplemental budget, breaks where you can, I don't know how many times we did it for a 2 year, but you have the ability to come in half a year in or whatever those intervals are to respond to needs. I don't think it's a bad thing. I just kind of would lean more on staff on that decision in a way, because that, I think it could buy some extra time and staff's lives to not be doing the budget every 2 years or every year.
Councilor Dumont?
I brought that up when we were doing our review. I think I know Mayor Pro Tem was here on staff, but I think that the mayor and I are the only two that are currently on council that have been in the 2-year budget process. And just to reiterate what I said then, we went to the 1 year because of COVID. And my understanding through that wasn't necessarily that we were going to stay with it. It seemed like year to year, we weren't sure where dollars were and different federal dollars and tax revenues. So I really would, like Mayor Pro Tem, ask you guys. I mean, to me, it seems like we're doing a lot of extra work versus the 2 year. And I think that the budget process seems like it just never ends. And it concerns me that we're not allowing things to happen that need to happen as far as spending. The things that we buy or budget are usually big things that don't happen in 1 year. And I think it gives maybe too much opportunity for us to see the shiny things in the room. So, all that to say, I certainly, and that's why I brought it up in the thing, I'm curious what your guys' perspective is, because to me it seems like more, but I don't really know, your day-to-day, what that's done, and is it still efficient? I mean, that was kind of what staff had told us when we decided to stick with 1 year coming out of the pandemic. And I don't think we've ever had that conversation again after the, saying, okay, we're going to stick with this for a while.
Mayor, you've done both. I wanted to hear your thoughts.
My head is so full and I don't know how to get it all out of what I feel. I did live with 2-year budgets. They were wonderful because we had, number one, a tight strategic plan. I can still tell you today, the 12 years I was on council, what that strategic plan was and what we did each year to make it happen, and still have developers call me to take them on visits of the city if they're thinking of coming in, because they know I was part of that 12-year vision, and I can tell them exactly why everything happened. And it did. We did not go on squirrel chases. We stuck to a budget. Something might have happened. Well, that's not in the budget. And we kept to it. So it wasn't a bad thing. And yep, if some crisis came up, we had to come to the table, figure out if it had to be done, where was the money coming from? Because we aren't the national government that could be billions and trillions in debt. We aren't. We have to be balanced. So with that, I don't know how you start. I don't know if you get your team together and say, what are the needs here? I don't know if I've heard some things about this department has this group of people, but when you go to that group to say, can we get help doing X, Y, or Z? The answer is no. And so this department has to have a second person that does some things that this group does. What do we do so we work as a team? And I have a list of things that I can think of that would be beneficial for the whole team. Wherever that lands in whatever department, it would be known, everyone that needs certain services, you come here, but it's for the entire city. So meaning staff and your departments. It was good in 2008 and 9 to take 18 months. We found duplications. We found things that we didn't need anymore. We had spaces that were left in different budgets and it just kept getting carried over and carried over. We wiped those 72 positions off of the books. Some of them were never going to be added back in. So get them off the books so they don't show. And we didn't have one person that lost their job. We had 18 months of helping people find jobs. We even had help with people figuring out whatever they were doing wasn't their love, and they found X, Y, or Z was really their passion, and they found jobs there. So was that a tough thing? Probably the toughest I've ever had to go through. But then when I came back, I can't begin to tell you how I felt with the bloating that this city had done. And I know what that council that came on in 21 did with an interim city manager to get $2 million off the books and to where it needed to be. But how much more is there? I don't know. I don't know. And am I convinced we've unbloated what was there? I have questions because of even my knit and crochet group, who sort of is my blah, here's what's happening. They've talked about the fire department. They have some outside the box thinking going on in that group on Sundays because they've listened, they've heard what the priorities are, but how can we serve it differently? I mean, there's suggestions out there. Or do we want to just keep doing the same old things? Or would they work? I don't know. But we've been having conversations on Sundays from 2 to 4. And people are engaged because they listen to us talk here. And they ask questions, and then somebody will come in 2 weeks later and go, well, I've been thinking about that. And these are great people that have great ideas. Some of them have worked here before, so they know what we have done in the past. But during 8 years, this city bloated. My first question is, prove to me that's gone. That there is no room for cutting anything. I don't know that. When we did this exercise in 2008 and 9, we found duplications. We found people, we have their job descriptions, and they were doing this. That isn't what they were supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be doing this. And so I liked the 2 years because we spent hard work getting to that 2-year budget. The next year, we could go through it. Were changes needing to be made because the police department has this, the fire department has that, the water department. We were able to have those discussions. It wasn't that it was in stone. But to me, it seemed like staff didn't have to gear up every year for this whole thing. But we have to prove first to the citizens, we have de-bloated this city from what it was for 8 years, what it got to, and start with what our needs really are, what our citizens need, what our departments need, what our first responders need, and go from there. If we have extra, then let's have a conversation between community surveys, between the departments that have done their strategic planning in their departments. Then let's put things on the table for, okay, we have this money. Now what are the priorities after we fill the strategic plan? I know that's mumble jumbled, but that's where I've been. And I had, like I said, the key was having 12 years of a strategic plan that kept adding on to each other. We knew where we needed to go, and we just took it in chunks to get there. And we did it. I can take people on a 3-hour tour and show 12 years worth of work. I can't say that today.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have KPIs for the different projects in the city? Do we have metrics that show the time team members are using on the separate projects? And of course, the example in front of us right now is the budget. You know, how many hours are allocated do we spend annually on the budget? But it'd also be good to know for the other projects that we do. Do we track that?
So I'm going to say no, and then let me give you some areas where we're working. We've been working with our capital projects team and the city engineer's office to track project manager time and associate that with projects. We get a better understanding of the projects that we can actually do with the number of project managers we have on staff. That's one area where I think we're making movement. You mentioned the budget. So when I think of operational alignment of hours on projects like the budget, no, we don't track that by hours.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I was just wondering if we had anything, a tool in which we could go back to say, okay, this is what it's costing us annually to do the budget each year. It sounds like we don't have a way to do that.
I don't believe so.
I mean, I've done some tracking of employees. It's in terms of it's attaching their time to specific widgets or things that they do. It's very difficult to get everything tracked because you have a lot of things that are operational or phone calls or interactions with community members or whatever the case may be that takes up additional time. So I guess if it were related to specific programs or, you know, finite projects or products, that is something that, but it takes time and, coming from the consulting background, logging your hours is not the funnest thing in the world, but, I think if it's finite, then, and the council is specifically wanting something that, staff that I'm sure could come up with a way to do some of it, but I think it is nebulous for some of the other work that we do.
What else do you need? Or do you have?
Can I provide a little feedback on the 1 year versus 2 years, since I think that's come up. So I've thought a lot about this. I've done both 1 year and 2 year here and at other organizations. I have a preference for a 1 year budget, and a couple of reasons. The first reason is technical. The city is, our primary revenue source is sales and use tax, which is notoriously difficult to project. A projection is a guess of where you're going to be, but when you look at sales and use tax in a 2 year budget, you're projecting sales and use tax collections 30 months out, 2.5 years, right? We would do those projections in summertime or December, 3 Decembers forward, to do a 2 year budget. So to do that, typically you're more conservative with your projections because you want to see that money come in to meet the demand. And then to spend that money that came in, you lose the time value of it, right? Inflation means things have cost more by the time you can actually spend it. So I think that kind of technical reason I prefer the 1 year budget. The second, we talked about this earlier, we're responsive or nimble to our community, and I think the 2 year budget can take away some of the ability to be responsive. Now, I think the city has been able to be nimble and responsive as we did a 2 year budget, but that actually caused what I saw was a similar amount of work in the mid-year versus doing the 2 year at a staff level. I didn't see a difference in creating the 2 year versus then coming back and doing an update of the second year, the mid-year. So I think that benefit isn't. I didn't see that. And then lastly, I would just give a reminder. I'm having to go back to our 2-year budget days. I believe the 2026 budget would be the second year of the 2-year budget. I'm looking at Barbara. We started in the odd 25.
Yes. We do odd even.
Odd even. So I think we would want to do a 1-year budget for 2026 if there is a desire to go back to a 2-year, because then you align it post-election, strategic plan.
No, I'm sorry. It was even odd. I believe it was even odd. I'll have to look. I apologize. I think we tried to do it so it wasn't lining up with an election.
All right.
Jog in my memory.
That won't come back on.
Okay.
Again, going back those couple of points, I see benefit of 1 year. I think if you stick to a planning cycle and have a little less responsiveness, you can make a 2-year budget work. But I think that's something that's a positive of the way we do services here in Westminster and the expectations of the community.
Just wanted to add, I think you made a really good point. I wanted to emphasize on that the inflationary pressures and economic uncertainty, right? That limits our ability to forecast revenue. So inherently, I can see the benefits of a 2-year, but then the cons would be inaccurate. And then we're inaccurately trying to hit a lower conservative revenue forecast, right? So it's because we forecasted it once before, and then the market changes, things change. So then I can see staff being overstressed because now they're holding themselves to a number that wasn't accurate in the first place. So I think it's a big risk. Where I think it could be a longer cycle would be better would be actually the strategic plan, because we have really a plan that we change every year, it seems. And I think if we have a more fixed longer term, maybe 2, 3, 4, or 5 years out, where we can stick to something at that level, and then that should guide the budget planning. In theory, that's how it's supposed to work. That would be where my gut says is we have a too short strategic plan. But I do agree with you that keeping the 1 year for now, at least until the economy stabilizes in some way, would make the most sense.
Odd even. So 2026 would have been the second year of a 2-year budget.
Is anybody, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I don't disagree on the strategic plan. I think, though, didn't we agree this year was just going to be it wasn't going to be a full process for those reasons. So I agree with that. I wouldn't go more than 2 years, though, because that's part of being responsive to the people who live here. And part of the reason that it was always done that way was because people might decide we're on the wrong path, and so that gives them the opportunity to replace council. But I'm glad to get the feedback that you gave, because that's what I was curious about, is how's it went. I think that one of the other things with like inflation specifically, it seemed like the dollars didn't go down the way we thought they were. The money just wasn't worth as much. So as inflation went out of control, it seemed like revenues, it wasn't accurately depicting where we really were in terms of being able to deliver services and construction because of how much things cost. It seems like that's kind of started at least leveling off, but I think that's a really good point of where it's probably been beneficial. And I don't think we're not through that. Inflation's still out of control. So.
Is anyone on council absolutely married to 2 years, or are we willing to continue with 1? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
I'll say I'm really grateful for the discussion, and thank you, staff, for providing some insight around that, because it's something that's been going around. So I feel much better hearing your feedback on it and knowing that the work is just as much doing it in 2 years as it is doing it every year, just because it's a heavier workload. And it makes sense considering our income comes from sales and use tax, and so there's a lot of fluctuation there. So anyway, I appreciate the discussion.
I think you have a decision. What else?
I think that was everything for staff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the conversation.
We need a break?
Yes.
Okay, 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Councilor Carmelia, I need you to switch links.